The corridor reeked of polished metal and stale antiseptic, a sterile haze lit by flickering overhead lights that buzzed like trapped insects. At the security checkpoint of Fort Halstead, a squat, gray complex nestled in the scrublands of northern Nevada, they upended Nora Kellen's worn leather satchel. A cheap pen, a spiral-bound planner with cracked edges, a faded postcard of a lighthouse, all scattered across the scuffed linoleum. The guards, in their starched uniforms, traded smirks as they rifled through her things. Then a young corporal, barely out of basic, unhooked the inner flap of the bag, and the air changed. The clatter of boots, the low hum of a distant air unit, even the guards' half-stifled chuckles. Everything stopped. He held up a small, tarnished medallion, its etched surface catching the light. It was a symbol they'd only heard of in whispers, one that rewrote every security clearance in the room to irrelevant. Nora stood still, her dark braid falling over one shoulder, her beige clerk's uniform blending into the background like camouflage. The medallion wasn't just an object, it was a key, a relic of a program buried so deep it was supposed to be myth. The corporal's fingers trembled as he set it on the table, and the senior guard, a wiry man with a clipboard and a permanent scowl, barked at him to step back. "Don't touch it again, Reese," he snapped, his voice tight with something closer to fear than authority. Two MPs materialized from the shadows of the corridor, their hands hovering near their sidearms, their faces blank but their eyes sharp with uncertainty. They didn't know what they were guarding, only that the medallion's presence turned the checkpoint into a live wire. Nora raised her hand slowly, palms open, a gesture of calm that kept her fingers close to the lanyard clipped to her belt. One tug, and she could flash the override code that would unravel this entire scene, but she didn't. She watched, calculated. The clipboard guard, Sergeant Tatum, his name tag read, ordered Reese to zip the bag but leave the medallion in plain sight. He wanted the brass to see it first. He wanted the credit. Credit for what? The question thudded in Nora's chest. She was a logistics clerk, a woman who reused tea bags and filed supply reports in a windowless office. Yet the medallion told a different story, one that outranked Tatum's ambitions by light years. The air grew heavy, the exit sign's hum fading as if the room itself held its breath. Outside, tires screeched against asphalt. Two officers in charcoal gray uniforms jogged toward the checkpoint, their steps clipped, their shoulders bare of rank or name, only a faint patch of a desert hawk stitched into their sleeves. Tatum's face paled to ash. He grabbed Nora's bag, his fingers brushing her arm before he let go, like he'd touched a live coal. "Sergeant Tatum, report," the taller officer demanded, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Tatum gestured to the medallion, his mouth opening and closing without sound. The officer's eyes locked on it, and Nora caught the flicker of recognition, a ripple across a face trained to show nothing. He straightened, inhaled, and turned to her. "Captain Celine Marr, is it?" he said, not asking. "Why is a Blackhawk operative moving through this gate without clearance?" The room tilted. Heads turned. The words Blackhawk landed like a shockwave, rewriting the unremarkable woman in front of them into something else entirely. Nora spoke for the first time, her voice steady, honed by years of restraint. "Because, Major, this operative retired. I'm a civilian clerk now. Regulation 14B permits unescorted transit under standard protocols." The Major's gaze flicked to Tatum, to Reese, to the MPs frozen at the edges, then back to her. Regulation 14B also forbids retired operatives from carrying identifiers that compromise their status. Explain the medallion. Nora exhaled, a slow release of fatigue, not rebellion. "I kept it," she said. "A memento. Of what I left behind." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The Major's eyes narrowed, weighing options, politics simmering behind his stare. The security team shifted uncomfortably, caught in a current they couldn't name. Finally he nodded. "Tatum, return her belongings. Log this as a procedural oversight and clear the gate in 30 minutes. Tatum started to protest, but the Major's glance silenced him. That's an order. Reese scrambled to gather Nora's things, his hands shaking as he stuffed the pen, the planner, the postcard back into the satchel. When he reached the medallion, he paused, holding it like it might burn him. Nora took it gently, slipped it into the bag's side pocket, and zipped it shut. She slung the strap over her shoulder and stepped through the metal detector. No one apologized. Humiliation doesn't retract. But as she walked down the corridor, whispers followed. Speculation, unease, and a grudging respect. By the time Nora reached Building 12, a low brick structure humming with outdated HVAC, she'd boxed the incident into a mental vault. But cracks lingered. The day felt off, like a photograph slightly out of focus. A supply request from a classified unit landed on her desk, untraceable and urgent. Her office phone rang twice, unknown numbers that disconnected before she could answer. Even the air outside carried a metallic tang, as if the world had shifted a degree off its axis. At 2:00 p.m., a courier arrived. Ventura delivered a sealed envelope, no return address. Inside, a single card, gray with black ink. Blackhawk Recall Protocol. Effective immediately. Retirement terminated under Article 9. Report to Hangar 4, 1800 hours. No signature, just a redacted stamp. Her pulse surged, a hot wave from her spine to her throat. Article 9 was a ghost story, a last resort clause for emergencies so dire that retired operatives were pulled back into service. It meant a crisis beyond protocol, beyond reason. She counted the hours to 1800, each minute heavy, pressing against her ribs. Nora locked her desk, emptied the trash, and lowered the blinds as if nothing had changed. But it had. She walked the service road past rusted dumpsters and a sagging chain-link fence, the desert wind sharp with dust. Hangar 4 loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against a sky streaked with crimson. Her steps quickened, shedding the clerk's hesitance, muscle memory taking over. Breathe steady, scan the perimeter, note the exits. The hangar's interior swallowed sound, its vaulted ceiling a lattice of dark steel. A sleek black reconnaissance jet crouched under dim floodlights, its curves gleaming like a predator at rest. Two figures stood beneath its wing, clad in matte black flight suits. The taller one raised a hand, not a wave but a coded gesture spelling nightshade, her old call sign. Nora's breath caught, but her voice held steady. "Kadir," she said, recognizing the compact man beside the jet, his face scarred, his grin faint but alive. "I heard you were gone." He shrugged. "Rumors of my death were useful at the time." He nodded toward the jet. "Wheels up in 30. Briefing inside. We're going back." Back where? She didn't ask. She already knew. East of the 60th meridian, a desert where her boots had once left prints in blood-soaked sand, whispering codes into a dying radio as her unit dissolved. The morning's checkpoint felt distant now, a minor bruise compared to the weight of what was coming. She followed Kadir into the hangar, her boots echoing, the medallion a quiet heaviness against her chest. The interior of Hangar 4 was a cavern of echoes, its concrete floor cold and smooth under Nora Kellen's boots. High above, steel beams crisscrossed the ceiling like the ribs of some ancient beast, casting jagged shadows across a reconnaissance jet that gleamed faintly under surgical floodlights. The air smelled of oil and ozone, sharp enough to sting the back of her throat. Three figures stood in the dim light, their silhouettes carved against the jet's matte black hull. Nora, her dark braid now tucked under a tactical cap, stood at the center, her posture taut but fluid, arms crossed lightly as if bracing for a storm. Kadir, compact and weathered, moved with a limp he hadn't had years ago, his scarred hands restless at his sides. The third figure, lean and silent, hovered near a metal table where a single monitor glowed with a frozen satellite image. The terrain on the screen was unmistakable. a stretch of desert west of Kandahar, where dunes swallowed roads and settlements vanished under dust. Nora's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from recognition. She'd walked that ground before, under a sky that bled red at dusk. The image showed a cluster of low, sand-colored buildings, their edges too precise for a civilian village. A wire fence circled the compound, invisible from above except for the faint distortion it cast. In the central courtyard, a lone figure knelt, wrists bound, flanked by 2 guards in mismatched gear. Beside them sat a small, matte black case, no larger than a briefcase, its surface unreflective, almost pulling light into itself. Nora's breath caught. "That's impossible," she said, her voice low but sharp. "That program was scrapped, buried." The silent figure turned, her face catching the light. "Captain Lena Varkas, call sign Wraith. Presumed dead after a botched op in the Persian Gulf 8 years prior." Her features were harder now, the softness of youth eroded, but her eyes still held that quiet intensity that could hush a room. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just pointed to the screen. "That case isn't from the old program," she said. "It's a rebuild, and it's live." Nora's mind raced, piecing together implications. The original Black Hawk program, her program, had been dismantled, its tech locked away in a vault beneath Greenland's ice, rigged with a kill switch to erase itself if tampered with. If this case was active, someone had cracked the encryption, raided the archives, and rebuilt what was never meant to see daylight. Kadir leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "Moved 3 weeks ago. Not by our people. Not by any allied network. This is internal. Deep internal." Nora stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the screen as Varkas tapped it twice. The image shifted to a new frame. A crashed drone, its wreckage strewn across a rocky slope. On one shattered wing, a faint emblem. A hawk, half erased by fire. One of their own. The realization hit like a cold wave. Someone had salvaged Black Hawk's remains, code, hardware, secrets, and turned them into something new, something rogue. Varkas held up a small object between gloved fingers, a carbon fiber tag, etched with a code Nora recognized as her own decoy alias, used only once in a mission that never officially happened. "They're using our ghosts," Varkas said. "This came from the site." Nora's fingers twitched, her body recalibrating to a rhythm she'd buried years ago. Not just instinct, but purpose, sharp and unyielding. "They're baiting us," she said, her voice steady. "They knew we'd come." Kadir grunted, his scarred mouth twitching. "And we're going anyway." Varkas nodded toward the jet. "Windows tight. 16 hours, extraction in 5. You go in solo. More than one, they'll see you coming." Nora's jaw tightened. "Understood." Varkas reached into a case beside the monitor and pulled out a patch, black thread, a hawk clutching a jagged line, now edged in a thin crimson border. A silent order. No backup, no trace, no rescue unless the mission succeeded. Nora took it, her thumb brushing the stitching. Varkas's voice was flat, final. "Your retirement's void. You're active." Nora didn't reply. She reached into her satchel, the same one the guards had torn apart that morning, and slipped the medallion into its pocket. Not hiding it now, but claiming it. She stripped off her clerk's uniform, the khakis falling to the floor like shed skin, and pulled on the black flight suit that molded to her frame as if it had been waiting. Her old wristband, marked with 4 notches from her first mission, clicked into place. At 1842, the jet rolled out of the hangar, its engines a low hum that vibrated in her chest. By 1845, Fort Halstead Systems updated her status from civilian to field operative, the change rippling through classified feeds. The checkpoint guards, still at their posts, watched the update in silence, their faces blank. At 1849, the jet climbed into a sky as dark as ink, its silhouette vanishing against the stars. Nora sat in the cabin, the medallion's faint weight steady against her chest, a relic reborn under the jet's red interior light. At 36,000 feet, above a desert corridor in southern Afghanistan, the jet glided like a shadow, its radar-absorbing skin swallowing signals. Nora's eyes were half closed, her mind segmented, memories of past ops stacked neatly, emotions locked down, focus honed to a blade's edge. Below lay a terrain she'd crossed before, under gunfire, carrying orders that left 9 dead and 1 survivor who shouldn't have been there. A girl, no older than 10, her eyes wide in the chaos. The briefing had outlined the mission. Retrieve the case, neutralize the handler, vanish. But Nora saw the seams. Too clean, too convenient. This wasn't a recovery. It was a lure. At 0247 local time, the jet dipped into a silent glide over jagged hills. Nora unbuckled, donned a thermal harness, and sealed a drop mask over her face. No countdown, just a step into the void. She fell, the chute deploying like a dark wing, landing in a crouch on sand that swallowed sound. Rifle up, she scanned the horizon. No wind, no movement, just dust curling in the moonlight. 8 minutes later, she reached the compound's perimeter. Mud walls, too uniform for a village, too fortified for civilians. She slipped through a gap near a humming power box, her movements fluid, silent. The courtyard was empty except for the case, its black surface glinting faintly. And beside it, a figure. Varkas. Wraith. Her face unmasked, her eyes heavy with something Nora couldn't name. Nora raised her rifle, finger off the trigger. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low. Varkas's hand stayed visible, non-threatening. "I said Blackhawk was reactivated. I didn't say by whom." The case hissed, a red light pulsing twice, like a heartbeat. Nora stepped closer. "What's in it?" Varkas's voice was calm, almost soft. "Proof. Not of their orders, but of what they did to us." Nora's grip on the rifle eased, her mind racing. "They planted the medallion in my bag, didn't they?" Varkas nodded. "You didn't pack it. They did, to see if you'd come." The case clicked, its surface now showing a faint etching. Blackhawk Archive 0.2. Not a weapon. A vault. A record of every mission, every erased order, every life Blackhawk had taken or spared. And it was live. Broadcasting. The desert air was thin, sharp with the scent of dry earth and distant diesel. Nora Kellen crouched in the shadow of the compound's mud brick wall, her rifle lowered but still cradled, her eyes locked on Lena Varkas. The black case between them pulsed with a faint red light, its surface etched with Blackhawk Archive 0.2. The courtyard was a silent stage, the moonlight carving stark lines across the sand. Varkas's voice cut through the stillness, steady but heavy. "This isn't about retrieval, Nora. It's about exposure. They wanted to see who'd answer the call, who'd still carry the weight of Black Hawk." Nora's jaw tightened, her mind sifting through the implications. The medallion in her satchel, the recall order, the 2 perfect satellite images. It was all a script, and she'd walked into it. But not alone. Varkas gestured to the case. "Every mission, every cover-up, every name they erased, it's all in there. And it's broadcasting now." Nora's gaze flicked to the sky, where a faint hum vibrated. Not from the ground, but above. A drone formation, barely visible, their outlines ghosting against the stars. "Those are ours," she whispered, her voice flat, not a question. Varkas shook her head. "Not anymore. They've been repurposed." The case hissed again, its red light blinking faster, a heartbeat racing. Nora stepped closer, her boots silent on the sand. "Who's behind this?" Varkas's eyes, dark and unreadable, met hers. "We are. Me, Kadir, you. The ones who survived. We built this vault, pieced it together from scraps, logs, recordings, orders they thought were burned. This isn't their trap. It's ours." The ground trembled faintly, a ripple from the sky as the drones tightened their pattern. Nora's pulse steadied, her training locking her focus into place. "You used me as the trigger." Varkas didn't flinch. "We needed someone they'd underestimate. Someone they'd let through the gate with a planted medallion. You were perfect. A clerk, retired, invisible, but still one of us." Nora's fingers brushed the satchel at her hip, the medallion's weight a quiet anchor. She'd zipped the bag herself that morning, or so she'd thought. The realization stung, but it didn't break her. "What's the end game?" she asked. Varkas's voice turned cold, precise. "The archive goes live globally in 38 minutes. Every terminal, every embassy, every command center will see what Black Hawk was, what they did to us, to the people we were ordered to erase." Nora sat beside the case, her back against the low wall, the rifle resting across her knees. The desert stretched endless around them, its silence a mirror to the clarity settling in her chest. Not anger, not betrayal, but purpose. The kind that burned clean. She glanced at Varkas, who monitored a small device wired to the case, her fingers adjusting signal relays with surgical precision. Above, the drones circled, their signals pulsing blue across the horizon, a silent broadcast weaving through encrypted channels. Nora saw it in her mind. Terminals lighting up in bunkers from Brussels to Seoul, screens flashing with names, dates, coordinates. Missions that never existed. Operatives who were never born. And her name, Nightshade, scrolling across classified feeds, a ghost made flesh. In a Virginia command room, a general froze as a grainy video loaded, his own voice, clipped and calm, ordering the termination of Asset Nightshade in 2012, in a Syrian alley where a car bomb missed her by seconds. Nora saw the same clip on Varkas's device, the timestamp seared into her memory. She'd walked out of that alley, blood on her hands, a child's scream echoing behind her. They'd tried to erase her then, not just from records, but from existence. Now the world would know. Varkas spoke without looking up. "It's hit the final node. Unstoppable now. Full replication in 42 minutes. Nora nodded, her voice low. "And us?" Varkas's eyes flicked to her, a rare softness breaking through. "We vanish. Not as ghosts this time. As echoes." The wind shifted, carrying the faint whine of the drones. The case's light steadied, its broadcast a silent roar across global networks. Embassies in Santiago, Nairobi, Canberra blinked at footage of strikes never reported, detentions never logged. Families who'd buried empty coffins saw names attached to faces for the first time. In a Pentagon sublevel, a screen showed Nora's face, younger, sharper, entering a building that collapsed an hour later. The order to eliminate her had come from a voice now trembling in a leather chair. Nora leaned back, her hand resting on the satchel, the medallion warm through the leather. No rage, no grief, just truth, finally clawing free. When she stood, her knees ached, not from age, but from the weight of years carried in silence. The jet waited beyond the compound, its engines a low hum in the distance. Varkas packed the device, her movement swift, practiced. "Extraction in 10, she said. Nora nodded, slinging the rifle over her shoulder. The flight out would be invisible, untracked, uncelebrated. No medals, no apologies, no record. But she didn't need them. The medallion, still in her satchel, was no longer a relic, but a testament. 3 weeks later, Fort Halstead's checkpoint was gone. Not upgraded, dismantled. The guards who'd searched her bag were reassigned, their records scrubbed. Whispers spread through the base, not in reports or briefings, but in pauses. Young officers hesitating at locked doors, majors glancing twice at women in civilian clothes. A drone crashed in Nevada's desert, and someone muttered Black Hawk under their breath. Nora Kellen was gone again, folded into the world's quiet corners. Not hidden, not erased, but present in the way truth lingers. Her name lived now in dark archives, seen by those who'd never speak it aloud. Some stories don't end with fanfare. They end in silence, in the weight of a truth finally witnessed. If you've followed this far, what would you have done in her place? And if her story resonates, pass it on. Someone needs to hear it.